I'm about to show you a strategy that has a 90% win rate. No, I'm not going to show you any proof. I'm not going to show you any payouts. I'm not going to show you anything. I want you to go and backtest yourself because I don't want to prove to you anything. I'm not going to make a false claim if I can't back it up. And I want you to literally go on the chart yourself and backtest what I'm saying. That's all I'm going to do for the intro. Just trust me, go backtest. And without further ado, let's just get into the video because you're going to actually see how insane this strategy is. Now, here's the chart, and I'm not going to go back in replay mode and find a bunch of perfect examples of this working. I will show you losses too, but let me just explain the basics of my strategy. If you don't already know, I trade IFVGs, okay, an inversion fair value gap. So what this basically means is I basically look for a bearish or bullish fair value gap, which is basically, this 3 candle formation where the first and the third candles, high and low, do not interlock, okay? So you kind of see the low of this candle does not overlap the low of this candle, and it creates this fair value gap. Now, yes, this is a good support zone, but what I do is I wait for this to break to the downside, and that's how I trade. And I created my own model out of it. I learned it from ICT, but I did not get this model from ICT. I created it myself and learned everything else from ICT, okay? So don't get that mistaken. A lot of people say, I created inversion fair value gaps. I did not create inversion fair values. I just created like a model and put them in the map, and I was one of the first people in the space that ever even used them. And now everyone and their mother copies me, okay, which is kind of funny. But if you don't already have my IFVG rating guide, I want you to go to the description. Okay, it's gonna look something like this, where I'm gonna give you a link to download it, and it's going to be my free guide or my free ratings guide, which I'm gonna use and show you, which is gonna be all my inversion setups. Now, do the B setups win? Yes, they do, but they win when your bias is right. So, if you want the highest win rate, you're going to need to know the bias, narrative, and context surrounding the trade, and then you can take the B setups. If you want the highest win rate without any narrative, then the A+ setups are probably going to be best for you, which looks something like this. But let me just go over an example on a few setups of my strategy and how you actually trade it. So, the first thing I look for is a liquidity sweep. Okay, so I'm looking for any obvious low. Okay, and it has to be like obvious to the point where if I'm looking at the chart, I can back up all the way back here and still see the fair value gap and still see the low. So I'm backing away 10 feet from my screen and I'm still able to see this low. That's how you know this is a good low. So I'm looking for very obvious lows that are swept on the 15-minute time frame, the 5-minute time frame, the hourly time frame. And then I'm looking for typically a 1-minute inversion setup, a 2-minute inversion setup out of that range, okay? So it's going to look something like this. We have sell side liquidity here, and I'm looking for it to be swept, and I am looking for an inversion back up, okay? So basically like this, and here's your inversion fair value gap, or your IFVG for short. Now, when I'm looking for the setup, the reason why I have such a high win rate is because of a break-even method, which I'll explain in a moment. But this is like the general concept of what I like to trade. Now, let's say, this is, a high of day. Okay, let's say we're really, really high. This is a high day. This setup is going to be a little lower probability than if this was like at a low day. Okay, so let's say this is low day, and then you see that. This is going to be a little higher probability at that point. Here's an example of, a trade I took today. And I ended up scaling half and then getting stopped the rest of break even. But, where's the inverse? Well, you can see the inverse fair value gap is right here. And we break this fair value gap. So I take the long, and the stop loss is generally like a close back below the fair value gap. And I'm going for this. Now you're probably wondering, like, why would I scale here? Well, I scaled there because it's the 50% mark, and I know if I'm wrong, we're going to reject it. So I like to take profits there, and you can see I was wrong about the bias, okay? So I'm not claiming to be right, but I was wrong about the bias, and the rest got stopped at break even, okay? Which is completely fine, to be honest, right? Because it's not a losing trade. But the reason why this is a good trade is because, look, if you look to the left over here, there's a 5-minute fair value gap. Okay, so when we retrace into this and sweep the low and we get a really good reaction, then I know it's going to be a good play. Now you're probably wondering, like, how do you know if we're going to get a good reaction? And this is where I have a very good saying, you react, not predict. I typically try not to predict reactions. Now, have I been getting better at it with experience? Of course I have. But I try to react more than I predict. And honestly, if you see this in live time, you are reacting. You didn't know that was going to happen. You just see that we got a big candle off this low. And now that I see that in hindsight, right? This is hindsight. I know this inversion fair value gap is going to be a good play. Okay. And this is the 3-minute time frame. And, you know, obviously it worked out for a scale half slash break even. Now you're probably wondering, like, what time frame do I typically use? Do I use a 2 minute? Do I use a 3 minute? And it all depends. Like, if I'm super, super confident in liquidity and, you know, the market came to this low, so we should at least go back to the 50%, then I'll take whichever inverse is first. For example, this is a 3-minute time frame, and this is the 2-minute time frame. And the 2-minute didn't inverse yet, but the 3-minute did. But I still took the play because I still have a lot of screen time from experience and knowing the context and the narrative that we were still likely to go up there. Now, let's say we're chopping around a little more and I'm a little less confident, then I will wait for the 3-minute and 2-minute to close above. But that's pretty much the general consensus of the strategy that I use. I'm going to show you one more example and, you know, kind of break it down for you guys. Just so you guys kind of get a little more, you know, info. And it was actually Wednesday for FOMC. So this was the 30-second time frame. And before you click off the video thinking, oh, I'm never going to trade the 30-second, this applies to the daily time frame. This applies to the weekly. This applies to every time frame in existence. Anyways, we have a high here. I can very easily see it when I back away from my screen. And it's a singular inverse. And it gets inverse with a nice candle. It took only 3 candles to inverse. We swept this high. So, you know, that's an entry I'm automatically going to take. I'm going to take it when it closes. So when the entry is typically when it closes below, and then I'm going to target that opposing low or that opposing sell side liquidity. Now, could you have targeted more? Sure. But I'm not going to be one of those hindsight furious who's going to tell you, oh, yeah, you should have targeted this low, because that's just BS, okay? Let's face it. So here I would have taken this. Anything lower is extra for me. This was the next obvious low. It was about a 2-hour trade, well, 1.8 hour to be exact. And that's what I would have done. And my best student, Reliable, okay, I have a subscription service if you want to watch me live trade, link in the description for that, who actually alerted this play in live time. And I joined the stream because I wasn't at live trading at this time. I joined the stream and I'm like, this is really textbook. Ton of people took it, ton of people banked on it, and you know, a lot of people to say, oh, FOMC is gambling, but my strategy is still going to be high probability. Okay, now let's go to a setup that technically fails. So this is a setup that technically fails. Okay, so see how we get an inversion for value gap. It looks like it kind of looks like we swept liquidity, I guess, maybe pretty far away. So yeah, we swept liquidity here. And, you know, we sweep this liquidity here, we sweep this liquidity here. And it looks like we're in like a higher time frame for a value gap, if I had to guess, probably in the 1 hour. And we go to the 2-minute or you go to the 1 minute and or the 30-second, you see, oh, this fails. You know, what's wrong with the setup? And I have these little different nuances on different setups. So you can't just watch this video and expect to have a 90% win rate, okay? It's a lot of, you know, background information and context. For example, I never would have taken this one. One thing I always state in my live streams every day, and keep in mind, I've live streamed for over 3 years, is I tell everyone I'm not going to ever take the first inverse after a big dump in a row. I like to wait for another manipulation leg, and then I like to take the inverse. So this happens to be a loss, and you might be like, oh, I bet Dodgy took that, but it's a lot of screen time that adds to my win rate, and I know that I'm going to wait for the manipulation leg here because I typically don't like taking the first inverse after a giant dump in a row. Now, if it's not a giant dump, you know, something like this, well, then I'll be more, you know, inclined to be, you know, taking something like this, right? Because it's not really a giant 100-point dump straight down. This is the first inverse. This is more of like a straight down dump. But like I said, there's a lot of nuances with this, and I'm only scratching the surface of my strategy. If you want to pay me $100 a month, feel free. My YouTube is free, so you can just watch my YouTube. I'll show you like a lot more nuances in live time. Okay, my student, you know, let's say Kenneth, for example. One of my students just got a payout. Okay, you got a $500 payout. And Scott got 3 $500 payouts. And they're all using this strategy, okay? This is my mentorship. I literally just started like 3 months ago. And these are people who literally have no idea what they're doing, and they're now making $500, $1,000 like after my mentorship, and they're just using what I use. But they didn't watch just a single YouTube video to learn this, okay? What they did was they watched my YouTube videos and they backtested themselves. They watched me on live stream, and they did so much more than that. So if you truly want to learn, just click the link in the description. You can book a call if you want. And if not, then run with the information I just gave you. Go back test yourself, because I guarantee you're going to find a very high win rate strategy depending on, if you know the context, if you know the bias, and, run with it, maybe twist it into your own model. But the model I'm showing you here in this video, like this, this IFG model is very high probability. Any V-shape inverse you see, such as, let me see if we can find an example real quick. Any V-shape inverse you see, okay, that's like a super, like goes over an internal high, V-shapes back down, bullish for a value gap, breaks it right away. Like this win rate with just pattern trading this alone is still extremely high. And this is knowing no context. This is just complete pattern trading. And I do have an indicator coming out in the soon. I'll give you guys updates when that's going to come, but it's going to be a little bit. And again, that's typically, what, I take, but I obviously put it with context and narrative, which makes the win rate extremely high. But I'm telling you guys, just go run with it. Go back test it. There's nothing to lose here. And that's pretty much going to be the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Peace.